There are some weird mysteries going on around the NBA, from players completely vanishing to an NBA player haunting an arcade game. These are unsolved NBA mysteries. And for number one, we have to talk about a video game that is haunted by an NBA player. Drazen Petrovic was a star in the NBA, and he's considered to be one of the best European players ever. He started his career on the Portland Trail Blazers, where he was then traded to the New Jersey Nets. And Petrovic was one of the best shooters the NBA had ever seen.
I think he is the best shooter I've ever seen in my life. Better than Ray Allen.
He was Steph Curry before Steph Curry, but after just 5 seasons in the NBA, we received the worst possible news.
A moment of silence was observed for Drazen Petrovic. The Nets star was killed on Monday evening in a car accident in Germany. He was known as one of the hardest working NBA players and one of the league's greatest outside shooters.
But the real mystery about all of this is when the video game NBA Jam came out in 1993, just shortly before Drazen Petrovic's tragic death. Since he was one of the NBA's brightest stars, he was included in the first version of NBA Jam, a basketball arcade game that would take over the 90s. Petrovic's tragic death happened after all the arcade games were built and shipped out, so you were still able to use him on the New Jersey Nets. But it was one night when the creator of NBA Jam noticed something strange happening with the arcade game.
Somehow, the coin-operated game in the attract mode, when nobody's playing, would every once in a while would just call out Petrovic, just out of the blue. And so, people caught on to that there was it felt like a haunted game. And so I don't know how that glitch could happen or what, it doesn't make any sense.
Now, having a ghost in a video game might be the weirdest thing I've ever heard, but something even weirder is how Yao Ming was made in the lab. Yao Ming was a 7'6" Chinese center with the skills of a guard and with the size of a skyscraper. But did you know, Yao was bred to become the greatest Chinese basketball player of all time? The Chinese government wanted to put China on the basketball map, so they decided to breed the greatest basketball player the country has ever seen. They brought together the 2 tallest basketball players they could find. His mother was 6'3" and his father was 6'7". As soon as he was born, he was immediately thrown into special treatment and basketball training. His parents knew he was born just to play basketball, and he was surrounded by it so much, he even started to hate it. And apparently scientists were feeding him mysterious concoctions to help boost his height, stamina, and strength. But I guess it worked, because Yao is the tallest player in the Hall of Fame. Now, if we're talking about the weirdest mysteries in the NBA, we can't forget about the ref that was sent to jail. Tim Donaghy was an NBA referee who, in 2007, was in the middle of an FBI investigation for betting on NBA games. He would bet on games that he was officiating, making calls to make sure his bets always hit. He would also use coded language to let players know about other players' injuries and other important information during games. Donaghy admitted that a certain game in the 2002 NBA playoffs was completely rigged because NBA referees would blatantly miss certain calls on players and call them on others. And the reason they did this was because it was in the NBA's best interest to add another game to the series. He never said what game it was, but he did say it was the 6th game in the series. And the only game that went to Game 7 was the Western Conference Finals, Lakers vs. Kings.
He openly said to a lot of us that he was the NBA's go-to guy. He was put on Game 6s to make sure they went to a Game 7, and that was one of the most fucked up, games in the history of the NBA.
Yes, yep.
And when you talk about 3 referees supposedly making so many mistakes in a conference final game, where in America can you perform at that level in your job so poorly and still go to the next level and ref in the NBA Finals and get another bonus of $20,000?
Now, one of the biggest mysteries in the NBA surrounds the GOAT, Michael Jordan. That's because when he was on top of the world, after winning 3 championships in a row, he mysteriously retired. It was 1993, and at the age of 30, Michael Jordan just led the Chicago Bulls to the 3rd ever three-peat in NBA history. And in October of that year, at the top of his prime, MJ would announce his retirement and shock the entire world. He said that he had a lack of desire to play the game at the same level of intensity, and that he had already proven himself to be the greatest of all time. It was time for Scottie to step out of his shadow, and for Phil Jackson to continue coaching at the highest level. And in July of 1993, MJ's father was murdered. It was always his father's dream for MJ to play baseball, so this was his chance to leave basketball while he was still at the top to go pursue his father's dream. But what if I told you there may be a secret reason for MJ's retirement? Jordan was a known gambler, and it got him into lots of trouble. Back in 1992, after he won his second championship, he was called to the trial of James Bowler. Bowler was a well-known convicted drug dealer who was in possession of a personal check that was signed by Michael Jordan for $57,000. At first, Jordan said it was a business loan. However, under oath, MJ would admit that it was a payment for his gambling losses that occurred over just one weekend. And before Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals, MJ was spotted in a casino in the early morning before the game. So after he won his third championship in 1993, the NBA launched an investigation into Jordan's gambling problems to see if he violated any of the league's rules. And just 4 months after this was announced, he also announced his retirement. It's rumored that MJ took a secret agreement with NBA Commissioner David Stern to leave the NBA for a certain amount of time as a suspension. But instead of ruining the GOAT's reputation, they decided MJ would take this time to try baseball. But if that wasn't crazy enough, when MJ unretired, he would lead the Bulls to another three-peat. It was clear that Michael Jordan was the best player in the world, and he could even tell the refs when he got fouled.
He never picked it up and didn't. But he didn't touch it with both hands. That's the thing. You think so, Michael? 55 hits, 2 to come. Michael, I didn't see 2 hands on him, Michael, but I believe you. I only saw the 1 hand.
One of Michael's former teammates, John Paxson, did an interview with the former NBA supervisor of officials, Daryl Garrettson. He told Paxson that Jordan got away with a ton of fouls because the referees knew that people paid lots of money to watch Michael Jordan play. So to make sure people got their money's worth, they would make sure Jordan didn't foul out of the game. But being so good, the refs give you every call is nothing compared to being murdered by your own brother. Bison Dele was a top 10 pick in the NBA draft. He played only 8 years in the NBA before he retired at the age of 30. And after he retired, he didn't miss basketball at all. He traveled the world and enjoyed his time away from the game. In 2000, he settled down in Tahiti and bought a boat he named Hakuna Matata. And on July 6, 2002, Bison alongside his brother Miles and Miles' girlfriend set sail from Tahiti to Hawaii. But little did they know, this trip would change their lives forever. The Hakuna Matata was found off the coast of Tahiti with no signs of the 3 passengers. It was like they vanished from thin air. But just a few days later, the boat was seen docking back in Tahiti. But there was only one problem. There was only one passenger, and it was Bison's brother Miles. Police tried everything to find Miles, but he was long gone. That is, until they got a tip on where he was. He was on a beach, relaxing in Mexico. However, when police got there, they figured out he overdosed and fell into a coma. He later died on September 28th, and no bodies were ever found from the trip on the Hakuna Matata. And unfortunately, Bison isn't the only NBA player who has been murdered. Lorenzen Wright was the 7th pick of the legendary 1996 NBA draft, which brought us players like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, and Steve Nash. Wright was a 6'11" center who played for 5 NBA teams: the Clippers, Hawks, Kings, Grizzlies, and Cavs. But he made a real name for himself in Memphis, where he had his best years as an NBA player. In his career, he would make about $55 million. He was a solid player in the NBA. But his story is more famous because of what happened after he retired. Because on the night of July 18th, 2010, Lorenzen completely vanished. Both the Grizzlies and the city of Memphis offered a $5,000 reward for any information on where he could be. But just 10 days later, Wright's body was found abandoned in a field. He had been shot multiple times and was left in the field to rot. Immediately, his ex-wife was the suspect. They had been divorced for over 5 months, and she had all the motive to commit the crime. As soon as Lorenzen died, she was able to cash in $1 million life insurance claim. But his ex-wife couldn't do it alone. That's where their landscaper, Billy Ray Turner, came in. They had a romantic relationship. and his ex-wife Shira Wright convinced Billy Ray to help her commit the murder. They were charged with first-degree murder in 2017, more than 7 years after the killing. Shira pleaded guilty, but Turner claimed he was innocent and went to trial. He was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison, while his ex-wife Shara only got 30 years. The saddest part was, Lorenzen tried to call 911, but dispatch couldn't figure out his location and couldn't understand him. Then they just heard gunshots. Lorenzen's jersey number 55 was retired on February 4th at the University of Memphis, where he will always be remembered. Now, as weird as these stories have been, it's only gonna get weirder. Wilt Chamberlain holds the record for the most points scored in an NBA game, but a record that's even weirder is the amount of women he slept with.
You made a statement, and this statement's going to follow you around for a while, that you slept with 20,000 women. You made that statement.
To put that in perspective, if he started at 18, he would have needed to sleep with 1.5 women every single day. I don't know what's more impressive, that or scoring 100 points in a game. Now, after doing all that, you have to think Wilt had some kids, but according to Wilt, he never had children. Or did he? Because one of his children could be Otto Porter Jr., or at least a grandchild. I mean, look at them. They look exactly the same. But Wilt Chamberlain isn't the only big man with something weird going on, because Anthony Davis has a secret he isn't telling anyone. Anthony Davis grew up in Chicago, one of the most dangerous cities in the entire country, with 695 homicides in 2022 alone. It's dangerous just walking down the street, let alone growing up there as a kid. Now, you would think Anthony Davis would have trouble sleeping at night with all the crime going on around him, and he did have trouble sleeping at night, but it's not for the reason you may think.
Number 7, what's the thing about yourself you'd most like to improve?
Me being scared of the dark.
Really?
Yeah.
How scared? Do you like night lights everywhere?
Like TV on, bathroom light on. Something might have to be on.
Yeah, the 6'10" AD is scared of the dark. He said he watched too many scary movies when he was a kid, and it messed him up for life. But in 2017, DeMarcus Cousins wanted to help Davis overcome his fears, so they decided to go to a haunted house.
My hand's sweating, I'm nervous. I got DeMarcus Cousins with me because he's my protector.
And Davis got so scared, he couldn't take it anymore. Someone help my man out. He's just trying to find DeMarcus. But that's not it for AD, because he pulled the ultimate prank and had everyone fooled. It was 5 years ago on April Fool's, when the brow almost took away his powers.
Here we go. My bad, guys, but it's done. Y'all tell me what y'all think of it. It's a big change. I think I like it.
He definitely wasn't fooling anyone, but Kevin Garnett had the whole world confused. He was one of the best big men to ever play the game, and even after his playing days, he was in the spotlight with his show Area 21. His show would last 3 years and end in 2019, but his show would make him go viral for something no one was expecting. Everyone was talking about him on Twitter and every news outlet, all because no one could figure out how his hood was staying on his head.
I think he tapes it on his head.
Okay, so that's the question. Do you believe, what do you think is there?
There's too much movement. This is way too much movement.
People everywhere were trying to figure out how it was possible for his hood not to fall off, but the ideas were too much for Garnett, and he had to let everyone know what was really going on.
Is there like Velcro on there that you always keep it like on the side like that?
So when you do a fresh cut, right, you know, when it goes back, it's like a little sandpaper. So if you put the hoodie on right here, it just won't move.
Now, we have to switch to talk about one of the tallest basketball players ever, Manute Bol. Manute stood at 7'7", and coach Don Feely knew immediately he would be a star in the NBA right when he saw him on the streets of Sudan. The only problem was, no one knew how old Manute was. There was no other documentation of his life, since he didn't receive an official birth certificate from his country. Coach Feely was able to get Bol to come to the US, and when he got to Cleveland State, Coach Mackey said he made up his birthday for him because even Bol had no idea how old he was. He explained that he made Manute 23 years old, but at the time, he thinks he could have been in his 40s. And when he was drafted in the second round of the 1985 NBA draft, his teammate would notice something strange. He used to say that he was 35 years old, but I used to be on the bench, looking at all the circles and scars around his head, and I asked him one day, Manute, what are all those scars on your head? Manute said, well, the white man lost my birth certificate in the jungle, so every 5 years, I take a rock and I slice one across my head. His teammate decided to count all the scars, and realized Manute Bol was 55 years old. But that's not even the best part about this story, because when the same teammate was asked about Manute Bol's weight, he said they used to let him drink all the time, so he would drink Heinekens all day to help him put on weight. So Manute Bol never played sober in one basketball game. He used to put on all of his clothes last, so what he would do after he got out of the shower, he would put on his socks, and that was it. He would just walk around the locker room naked, drinking Heinekens. Manute retired at 32 and passed away at the age of 47. However, we may never know his real age. But something we do know is something strange was going on in the 1985 NBA draft. Patrick Ewing is one of the best players to ever wear a Knicks uniform. It's almost impossible not to see him being a Knick, and the NBA made sure that he was going to New York on draft night. In 1985, Ewing was the consensus #1 overall pick, averaging 15.3 points, 9.2 rebounds, and 3.4 blocks per game for Georgetown. He was the perfect player for a team to build around back in the day, when centers ruled the NBA. New York is a huge market, and the NBA would do anything to make sure the Knicks were good again. The lottery system was large envelopes placed into a sphere, and the team's logo that was picked would have the #1 overall pick. Right before Stern goes to pick an envelope, he clearly takes a deep breath, knowing what he has to do next. And as you can see, as this guy puts the envelopes in, only one bangs off the bar. And right here, you can see the envelope with the Knicks logo has a crease on the corner. But it gets even crazier than that, because rumor has it that this envelope was also frozen prior to being placed in the sphere. That way, Stern knew exactly which envelope would be the Knicks, since it would be cold. But nothing was ever confirmed, so we just have to assume the Knicks got lucky with one of the best big men of all time. But a mystery that remains unsolved is how Markelle Fultz forgot how to shoot the ball. It was June 22nd, 2017, and it still remains as one of the weirdest drafts in NBA history. It's the night the Sixers took Markelle Fultz first overall, after trading up, sending their third pick and future first to Boston. The pick turned out to be Jason Tatum, but Markelle Fultz was the clear #1 overall pick, being able to pair him with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. It seemed to be a win-win for both teams involved, until Markelle Fultz forgot how to shoot, turning a once future superstar into a guy who couldn't even shoot free throws. Markelle was diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome on December 4th, 2018, and it involves compression or irritation on the thoracic outlet, the area between the neck and upper chest, making it almost impossible for him to shoot the ball. But how did he get it? Well, there's a theory that Markelle was involved in a motorcycle accident, and he even said that biking was his first love over basketball, and that he has the scars to prove it. What makes this so strange is that one of the most common causes for thoracic outlet syndrome is trauma due to a motor vehicle accident, especially from a motorcycle. Now, nothing has ever been proven, so we may never know what really happened to Markelle Fultz. Now, these are some of the weirdest stories in NBA history, but if you want some more, check out 12 Things You Didn't Know About Michael Jordan.